Right, we can get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Suhem Parack, and I'm a developer advocate for academic research here at Twitter. And I'm super excited to be talking to you guys about Twitter Developer Labs. So let's get started. Right, so here's a little bit about me. As I mentioned, I'm a developer advocate for academic research. So my job is to help academic researchers succeed in using Twitter's developer platform for academic research projects. My favorite programming language is Java, and it's mostly because that's the language that I've used the most and I'm most comfortable in. But feel free to share you guys' thoughts on Java and your favorite programming languages in the chat. And before joining Twitter, I was a solutions architect at Amazon Alexa, where I built some cool Alexa skills and worked with some managed partners. So let's take a quick look at the agenda for the workshop. I'll try and keep it really short and focus more on the hands-on sides of how do you actually use the APIs. But before that, we'll first talk briefly about what Twitter data is, what are some of the cool apps that people have like built with Twitter APIs so that those can inspire you in your hackathon. Then we'll also take a look at what Twitter Developer Labs is, and we'll look at how the authentication mechanism works for Twitter Labs, and we learn about other concepts like tweet annotations as well. So what is Twitter data? So Twitter is a platform that is used by millions of people to exchange ideas, share information, and learn about what's happening around the world. So Twitter data is used by developers as well as academic researchers to better understand what's happening around the world. So these researchers can be people from social sciences backgrounds, or some of them might be from like data science backgrounds, so like data scientists and so on as well. So next, we'll look at what some people have built with Twitter APIs. So there are a few apps that are available on Twitter's GitHub that people have built using Twitter APIs. So the first one that I mentioned there is like a parking app. So one of my coworkers who lives in New York, she built this app using Twilio, Python, and Twitter API to solve her problem. So basically, in New York, you have this parking regulation that you can only park on like alternate sites. But then there are like some days where you don't have to move your car. And so each time there's this Twitter account that will like tweet out saying that, okay, today you don't have to park or you don't have to switch your sides. And so she basically built an app with Python, Twilio, and Twitter API that lets her basically sends her a message on days when she doesn't have to switch it. Another one is Snowbot. So one of my coworkers built this app where you provide your region in like a direct message, and then it'll give you a snow report. So like when was the last time it snowed in a certain place, which are the open lifts currently, and so on. Then there are other things like a remote jobs listing app that another colleague built with tweet annotation. So that lets you find like remote developer jobs. And then there are academic researchers who also study things like hate speech or misinformation and how to tackle that in the Twitter platform. So then we come to Twitter Labs, right? So Twitter Labs is basically a way for us to provide developers with new endpoints, new features, and new versions. So we'll use labs to test out our new ideas and invite developer community to like try out those new endpoints and share our feedback or share your feedback with us so that they'll help us shape our roadmap. So how does authentication work for Twitter Developer Labs? So in order to use our APIs, you will need to authenticate so that we know that you're enrolled in the Twitter Developer Apps, Twitter Developer Labs, and you have an app created. So the Twitter Labs endpoints that we will use for today's workshop use OAuth 2.0 because we'll just be searching for publicly available information. So it's essentially using a bearer token, which is a base 64 encoded value of your client key and your secret. And we'll get into that once we get into the actual hands-on things. Then there's also this new concept of tweet annotations. So now in your tweet object, you also get this thing called annotations, which can be of like two types, entity annotations and context annotations. So entities are basically like in a tweet, what's mentioned, like a person, a place or product, and so on. And then context is like the overall topic for that new or for that tweet. So what are the APIs that are currently available in Twitter Developer Labs? So we have a new version of the tweets and users endpoint. So like get a tweet by an ID or like user by an ID. And we have tweet metrics. So tweet metrics is an API that provides engagement metrics for tweet from like owned and authorized accounts. We also have recent search, which is the next generation of our search endpoints that provides developers API access to search public tweets posted in the last 7 days. We also have two types of streaming APIs. So the first one is sample stream. The sample stream is basically about 1% of all new public tweets as they happen. And then the filtered stream allows you to like filter on the stream, right? So you can say that you want tweets from a certain topic, you want tweets on a certain, maybe those tweets might should include images, or those tweets should not be retweets and those kind of things. And so for this workshop, we'll mostly focus on the search endpoints, right? So let's take a look at the documentation for labs real quick. Oops. Okay, yeah. So in order to get the Twitter Developer Labs, you can go to developer.twitter.com, and then you go to Labs. And if I click on the About section, you'll actually get this page that introduces you to what the Twitter Labs is and what are the different offerings in the labs. So in order to first use it, you'll first need to create an app. So the way that you do it is you'll go to you'll need an account, and once you go into apps, it'll ask you to like fill in a bunch of details. And once you create an app, you're going to get your client ID and client secret. And once you have that, you can plug it into the different APIs in order to start getting data. And we'll get into each of those in just a second. So let's start by looking at the documentation for some of these, right? So starting with tweets and users. So the tweets API will let me get information about a single tweet or like a group of tweets. And then similarly, for a user, I can do the same thing. So I'll switch to, so for this demo, I'll use code samples that are provided by us on our GitHub repository. And at the end of this stream, I'll share in the Discord channel a PDF that has all the resources that include our GitHub repository as well. But so there are a couple of ways that we're making it easy for you to test our APIs. One is on developer. So like if you go to the labs on GitHub, you'll see that for each new endpoint, so like recent search, filtered stream, and so on, if I go into like one of these, you'll see that we have sample code that's in different languages, so like Python, Java, and so on. And all that you do is you'll pick your programming language of your choice, and then you'll plug in the client ID and client secret, and then you'll be able to use those. And we'll actually go through these in Python in just a second. But this is one way. The other way of using this is if you have used Postman before. So Postman is essentially a client that lets you make API calls. So like if you don't want to make the curl calls yourself, then you can go to Postman and you can get a collection. So if I go to run in Postman, I should be able to like import this. So if I see here, now it imported this collection for me. And if I go into the collection now, I can see that there are different APIs available to me. And all that I'll have to do is get a bearer token for these and start using the endpoints. But for this this demo, we'll actually use the where'd it go? Oh yeah. So we're actually going to use the Python samples that are available from um, GitHub. And also, to make it easy for you to get your bearer token, we also have like a glitch app. So what you do is once you create your app, you can put in your consumer key and secret, and it'll give you a bearer token that you can then use in your Postman collection and start getting data. So let's start to look at some of these APIs. And at the same time, I'll keep the documentation open as well so we can refer back to these, right? So let's start with the tweets and users. So if I go to my IDE, so I'm using PyCharm for Python. It's the same one that's similar to IntelliJ by JetBrains, I believe. So I've already downloaded some of these endpoints, and we'll walk through each of these, right? So let's start with, I think, get tweets might be a good one. So the way that our code samples work is all that you'll have to do is replace your consumer key and consumer secret that you got from the previous step. And once you plug those in, you should be able to run the code sample. So for my app, I created a config.python file, and then in that I put in the keys and I'm reading from there. But you can create like an environment variable and read from there, or if you use something like AWS, you can use something like Secrets Manager and read your keys from there. So let's start taking a look at the get tweets. So the get tweets endpoint is this one. And I'm passing it certain parameters that it accepts, right? So for one of the required one for required parameter is IDs. So it can be, so for this example, I've picked an ID. Now, if I run it without any expansion, so let's say I just select, give me this ID, and I run it. Then you'll see that the data that I get back for this tweet. So I'm saying for the labs to endpoint, the tweets endpoint, give me data for this tweet ID. So it's giving me the text and the ID. But if you notice in the tweets field, I actually selected like I wanted additional fields with it. So I used the tweet.fields parameter. And in that, I'm including created at, and the language also, the language is in English, and it's also giving me the created time. Then I can also do something like an expansion, and we'll get to the documentation in just a second to better understand what's going on. So if I run now, if you see here, now I get this additional object, which says that, okay, it gives me the user ID, the account name, and it also gives me the username. So let's take a quick look at the documentation for this again. So it'll make more sense to us. If I go to tweets and users, the API reference. Yeah, so you see here, tweets with ID. The required parameter was the ID. So I asked in my Python, in my PyCharm, that the ID was this. But then in addition to that, I also requested additional things like the expansion. And then I also asked for tweet fields. So I wanted additional things like what was the language of the tweet and when was it created. So you actually have the ability to like build out your JSON response using fields that you want to include in the response. So let's go back to the idea or the PyCharm. Yeah. So let's look at the get users endpoint. So get users is again similar to this, except instead of the ID, I'm passing it the username. So the username is Twitter dev, and I'm saying that expand or like the fields. I want user fields as well. So let's run it. So you'll see that for this user, you're able to see their name, ID, username, and those kind of things. So the I the way that you can use this in your hackathon is, let's say you're collecting tweets and you want additional information to be displayed for each of those tweet IDs. Then you can use um, an API like this. So like you'll collect tweet IDs, and then for all of those tweet IDs, you'll call either the get users or the get tweets one. Okay, I'm going to switch to the API documentation real quick. Yeah. So let's look at another endpoint, and that's the recent search endpoint, right? So the recent search endpoints lets you get historical data for the last 7 days. So this is similar to the current, like the standard search APIs that we have, except that now this is the next generation of our endpoints. So the way that you can use this again in your hackathon is, let's say you want all tweets from the last 7 days on a certain topic. And you want to further customize it by saying that I want it from certain users. I want it to include certain hashtags. I want it to include images, or I don't want it to include, for example, retweets and all those things. Then you can use the recent search for that. And the way that it'll work is you'll have to build your own like query. And the way that the query works is if you don't specify any space in between. So like here, snow day, no school, um, basically is telling us that it's an and operator in between these. You can also similarly have or, so you can say search for the term grumpy or cat or the term meme, and it's going to get you the results based on that. So here are like some additional operators that you can use for the recent search as well. So like you can, if you want like URL, hashtag, certain keywords, and so on. So let's try the recent search endpoint. Yep. So here's my code for recent search. And if you notice here, um, the query object, the query parameter right now says from Twitter dev. So what it's telling this new search endpoint is get me all tweets from Twitter dev in the last 7 days, right? And so let's try and run this real quick. So if you see, it includes things like the ID and text only currently. Um, and these are coming from the Twitter dev account. So let's take a look at the documentation and see how we can get additional fields for this endpoint. So I go to the API reference. So here you can see that you can get additional things like expansions, um, and then you can add additional fields like tweet fields that you want to include. So let's try tweet fields. If I go back to my PyCharm, and then I can like add something like, and tweet dot fields, um, and then I can include things like the author ID, or I can use the user fields as well. Okay, let's take a look at a couple of additional endpoints as well. So the next one that we can take a look at is sample stream. So the way that streaming endpoint works is that you create a a connection with our endpoint, and then as the tweets are generated, those will get delivered to you, and then you have option of, for example, you might want to like print it to a console, you might want to create a text file and store those for later use, or you might even want to collect those tweets and store them in like a database, or like if you use something like AWS, you might want to put it in an S3 bucket, DynamoDB, and so on. And so the major difference, as I mentioned, between sample stream and filtered stream is that sample stream, you don't set any rules while calling the API, and it just starts the get the live stream for you. So let's take a quick look at how sample stream works. Yeah. So, or sorry, okay, it's here. Yeah. So again, the endpoint is this one, which is under labs v1, and I have it configured to basically print to the console each time I get a response. So let's take a quick look at what's happening right now. So if you see now, my stream's connected, and as new tweets are generated, those are getting published here, and I'm for the purposes of this demo, I'm just printing it to the terminal. But essentially, what you might be able to do is um, take it and also add it in like a text file or S3. Also, other thing that we discussed earlier is that the concept of annotations and entities, right? So here, if you see, based on the text of the tweets, we're also able to get the annotations. So like there is the entity annotation saying that um, that this tweet contains entity of type organization, and which organization it might be. So in this case, it's MSNBC, and then similarly, you'll be able to see that for other entities as well. Yeah. So again, this is because this is a sample stream. You're not able to set the rules. You're just consuming the tweets, and then you're doing custom logic on your end to be able to basically get the tweets and do certain tasks that you want. So maybe for your hackathon, you're trying to collect tweets on a certain topic. So you might have like custom logic that's collecting the stream and looking for certain things and acting accordingly. But the other endpoint that we have is filtered stream. So this gives you more control of trying to um, select what your filter criteria is in order to get the tweet. So let's take a quick look at filtered stream. Or actually, yep. So yeah. So first is like you can set certain rules. You can delete the rules and you can retrieve the rules. And the other is to set up your initial stream. So let's look at what that looks like in PyCharm. But before that, for each rule, again, you have to look at it's similar to like what each rule will do. So like you can look for certain keywords. You can exclude certain keywords. You can look for hashtags, images, filter on retweets, and all of those things. And you can set up multiple rules. And then for each rule, your stream will bring you back certain data. So let's look at that in PyCharm, how that works. So here I'm back in my PyCharm, and here's the code for filtered stream. So let's see how this is set up, right? So in the first, I'm telling them I'm specifying the stream URL to use, which is obviously labs1 tweet stream filter, and then the other one is for setting the rules. So the way that you'll set up rules is and a list of these, right? So what I'm saying here is that give me, like, for the first rule, I'm looking for all dog pictures. So the value is what the filter is, right? So I'm saying that it should include the word dog. It should have images, and then I can do additional things like it's not is retweet and like things like that, right? And if you want, like, you can also like add additional rules. So you can add one here for like I don't know, another animal or some other term, and based on that, you'll give it a tag as well. So let's see when you run it, what do you get and how it's different from your sample stream. So let's run the filtered stream. So it's going to only get you data for that matches your criteria. So if you look here, it gives you matching rules in each response. So like if some of them are matching this cat pictures, dog pictures, so it's going to tell you the tweet object that it got back, which rule did that match on, and it got you back that data on that. So actually, let's take a quick look at one of those objects. So here, it was able to get, actually, let's look at this one. Yeah. So you see here the matching rules. It tells you which rule it matched on and got you the data. Yep. So let's go over these again real quick to just a recap. If you're looking to get only information about a certain tweet or tweet list of like tweet IDs, then get tweets is the one to use. If you want information about user, then you'll use get user, and then you can expand and make your response object as big or as small as needed for your um, yep, yeah, for your use case. Then we looked at recent search, which is the one that's going that's the equivalent for the current search that we have. And if you notice, it gave us really cool operators to be able to filter on things like who the tweet is from, and including and excluding certain fields, certain keywords, hashtags, and so on. Other one that we took a look at is the sample stream that basically give us a 1% of the data, and then it's up to us to write like custom code to do what we want with it. And then the one that we looked at in the end was the recent search, or sorry, was the filtered stream. And again, in filtered stream, similar to recent search, we have much more flexibility in terms of what kind of rules we want to specify, and uh, as much detail as we want in our response as well. So actually, I'm going to go back to the resources real quick. Yep. Yeah. So again, to get complete details about Twitter Labs, you can go to developer.twitter.com, and then you go to Labs, and the About section has all the information. And then, as I mentioned earlier, in order to get started, you will first need to create an app, which you will for which you'll have to specify certain information. Once you create the app, get your API keys, store there somewhere safe in environment variable of a file, or like if you use AWS, use something like Secrets Manager. And then if you want to get started real quick, and if you don't want to like use the code, you want to just try it out from much faster, then you can also just go to Postman, and in your Postman collection, just replace your keys or your bearer token, and then you should be able to run these. And like I showed you earlier, we also have a glitch app that we that lets you get your bearer token. So just put in your consumer key and consumer secret, and then you get the bearer token that you can then plug into your APIs. Finally, I wanted to point you again to the Twitter dev GitHub, which has this folder for lab sample code, and all of these are like updated with a new version. So like each time we come up with a new version, we'll update. So if you look at recent search, we have V1 and obviously the V2. And if you notice, we have support in multiple languages. So let's say you don't want to use Python, you want to use JavaScript, for example, you should be able to use those as well. All that you need is um, your keys. And yeah, also on the Twitter dev are like certain like other like apps that people build. So don't forget to check those out. Things like AutoHook and the remote dev job streamer things are like good projects for reference, specifically for people that are that are taking part in like hackathons and want to build a app fairly quickly. So yeah, that's an overview of labs. If you guys have any additional questions, feel free to share in the or yeah, feel free to share in the channel. And I see some of my colleagues are already answering the questions there as well. So yeah, thanks again, everybody, for taking the time to learn about Twitter Developer Labs. And you can reach out to me on Twitter if you have any questions using the labs endpoints. And I'll share a link with the resources at the end on what are the different resources that you can go to if you want to get additional information. Actually, I can share it real quick, and then yeah. So um, you can follow me on Twitter, and then if you start using Developer Labs, and if you have your feedback, we would love to hear that from you as well. And then we have a forum where you can. Oh yeah, somebody's asking if we can share the Twitter handles in the chat. Yep. Yeah. And then the FAQs for labs is here as well. And the Postman collection, you can go to the Postman website and you'll see that Twitter is also listed on there. And then link to the Glitch app. And I'll share this after this in the Discord channel as well. And yeah, thank you. Thanks for taking the time to